Hi, this is JD Kellner, author of The Cranes of Blackwell, and you're listening to Dead Hand Radio.
Welcome to Dead Hand Radio, JD, and thanks for joining me. If you don't mind, let's just get an idea of what you write about and what got you started into writing.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, so again, thanks for having me on. A big thing that I enjoy writing about, of course, is some science fiction, speculative fiction, and I do a lot of short stories for my website. And then, of course, my debut novel, The Cranes of Blackwell, had just come out back on October 9th. And I was really excited to see a dream of mine come to life. But I've been writing for a while. I'm one of those guys, one of those writers that would write a lot, at home, behind the scenes, and never let it see the light of day. Either because I was not confident in the things I was putting out, or sometimes I just didn't feel like it was ready. And I'm one of the types of writers that also spends a lot of time coming up with ideas, outlining those ideas, and then storing them away for future use. But for the Cranes of Blackwell, it was something that I just kept going with, right? I had the outline put out there. It took 2 years to write and 2 years to find somebody to publish it, and it was well worth the wait. I will say that. But yeah, I mean that's you know I went when I was in grad school. I went to a place called Mercyhurst University in Erie, Pennsylvania. And being from Pittsburgh, it's about 2 hours north of me. And when you're in grad school, you write a lot of stuff that you don't necessarily want to write about. So I actually didn't get to do creative writing for quite some time. One of the things that allowed me to do that was actually getting married. My wife encouraged it. I was very much letting her read the things that I was too afraid to show anyone else, and I was gaining confidence that way.
You said that your wife was a big supporter of your work, and she encouraged you to continue doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things like when you're a kid, I was very fortunate to have very supportive parents, but it's one thing to show your parents something, they'll always put it on the fridge. It's another thing to show it to somebody you're dating, right? What if they don't like that type of writing? I mean, certainly some of my short stories have a little bit more of a horror sci-fi theme to them, and oftentimes horror has some level of gore and violence in there. And I wasn't sure how she would take those things. And as a guy, when you're trying to impress somebody, you don't, you try to put your best foot forward. And whenever I found out that she was a fan of my writing and putting her support behind the things that I was doing, it really encouraged me to really push ahead and really push forward in getting a full novel out there.
That's amazing. Yeah, it takes so much effort, and I've never written a novel. I've done a few short stories, but to put a novel out there takes so much effort and so much energy and time that if you don't have the support of a spouse, it's just going to complicate the entire process to the point, and exponentially so, to the point where a lot of people don't even ever pursue it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings for me, especially with two kids. Um, it's just finding that spare time. And, and that's the support that she's able to give me is, hey, if you need tonight to write or do what you want to do to be able to get, your work done, your creative work done, take it. And, she's been very, very, very supportive with that.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Dead Hand Radio is focused on the Cold War, but not necessarily a historical recounting of the events of the Cold War and the people of the Cold War, but how the Cold War impacted the world and the different areas of our lives: culture, art, the film industry, and the literary industry as well. Were you alive during the Cold War era, or were you born after that?
So I was born in 1986. So a lot of the things that I got very early on, were GoldenEye, like James Bond. I was a big fan of the movie Miracle about the U.S. men's hockey team. Um, but one of my favorite movies is actually Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron. It's not, wasn't filmed during the Cold War era, but it really takes place during that, and it's maybe a bit of an exaggerated version of the spy culture associated with the Cold War era. But a lot of our um, pop culture still kind of goes around that. Much of my favorite science fiction movies, for example, are from the 80s: Aliens, The Abyss, Leviathan. And while not all of them are directly kind of talking about that communist capitalist type of um, conflict, there's always a little bit of those undertones, and they usually put them in there and saying, "Hey, is that a Russian submarine, or is that what it used to be?" Especially the movie Leviathan, I think with Peter Weller. One of the things they discover is an old Russian submarine, and they pull out the paperwork from there and what happened, and um, is it a Russian experiment? But my first real taste of the Cold War in pop culture is always going to be GoldenEye, the thing I can remember the most. Um, Pierce Brosnan and Sean Bean, and that movie in particular was kind of one of those things that it really opened me up to James Bond and the Cold War theme that took place in most of the early movies and novels.
Well, that makes complete sense that Atomic Blonde is one of your favorite movies then, because she is nothing short of an American female James Bond.
Oh, absolutely, fantastic movie. Definitely a lot of action, and that's something that I really like in my spy movies. I mean, um, Bridge of Spies, things like that. I do like those. I did like Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence. I thought that was kind of a unique take on not necessarily Cold War, it was post Cold War, but it was still stoking those tensions that we still see today between Russia and the United States. And I thought it was a really interesting storyline for using to kind of pull information out of their marks. So I thought that was a very unique take. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that movie, but I 100% recommend it. Um, my movie crush is Jennifer Lawrence. That's for sure, though. I'm not going to lie.
No, I did not see that movie, but I know the story. And that story is very similar to the backstory of Black Widow in um, the Marvel Avengers movies.
Okay, yeah, exactly. ScarJo, another big fan of hers as well. I'm not a major comic book movie guy, but you know, I do appreciate their backstories. I think I'm more of enjoying the lore about superheroes and villains rather than actually watching the movies or reading the comics. And maybe that's a bit unorthodox, but that's how I've always approached those types of things.
Yeah, I get that. I'm a big time visual person, so I'm all about the movies, all about the comic books. Um, I do like reading, but I'm a slow reader. So, and I've said this about 50 times in the last couple weeks. Uh, I tend to listen to audiobooks rather than read the books myself.
No, and honestly, I think that's a great way to get into as many books as you can. I know for me, my old job used to take me on the road a lot, and I would listen to audiobooks quite frequently. As with a lot of other people, I'm work from home full time now, um, but I still try to get actually in an audiobook or two a month. In the summer, it's when I'm cutting the grass or if I'm at the gym, or out on a walk. I find audiobooks to be extremely fascinating, especially if they're well done. Anything with a full cast is something that will immediately hit with me. That's for sure.
Oh, so more of an audio drama type of.
Yeah, and there's an audio drama of Ender's Game from Orson Scott Card that's really good. I think there's about 6 or 7 people that are included in it. Um, I 100% recommend it. I think it's only on Audible, but it's if you like science fiction, that's a good one to go for.
Good shout. I'll check that out. I have not read the book, but I've heard of it, and I think there was a movie made about it too, right?
Yeah, Harrison Ford was in it actually, and I'm with you. I actually haven't read the book. I've listened to the book.
Okay.
Um, some people will call it one and the same, and to me, it is.
Yeah,
you know, I
definitely. Yeah,
I still
definitely.
say the dialogue out in my head as I'm reading it. I'm with you. I'm not a fast reader. I find that if I'm reading too fast, I feel like I'm just trying to plow through something rather than enjoying the meaning and the message behind a written story.
Well, do you want to talk a little bit about the book that you just recently had published?
Sure, absolutely. So the Cranes of Blackwell came out from Kyanite Publishing on October 9th. It was kind of an interesting take on from what I've been trying to write. It's since it's considered speculative fiction, there is some things grounded in reality, but uh, the world itself is fictional. I tried to keep a lot of things there for the reader to kind of expand their own imagination, but a lot of the story involves a family that gets separated, but they actually work for the authoritarian regime that's in place. Um, and the husband is framed. Uh, it kind of builds to that. So he's framed because he's not thrilled with exactly how the regime has been operating. They get separated, and the book covers their stories on how they get back to one another, the things they have to overcome, kind of pushing aside their personal demons, doing things that they may not normally do in order to reunite their family. All the while, their young son James is being indoctrinated on a level um, that they're trying to stop before it's too late. So I won't give away the ending. I'm hopeful people pick it up one way or another, and but just know that you know there's a bit of a twist. Is the way I like to put it. There's a bit of a twist at the end. I'm not M Night Shyamalan. I won't do anything crazy, but um, the whole message behind it is certainly overcoming your personal demons to be able to conquer a greater evil, kind of that trope.
Good. Well, so yeah, I wouldn't ask you to give away spoilers. I mean, everybody enjoys a good twist, especially if it's at the end of a story. But can you set up the story for us? Because I'm not sure if it's like a medieval or not a medieval, but like is it a shipboard type of like a colonial era? When is the time setting?
Think 1930s. The one of the major inspirations I had behind, there was a couple. Um, then there's a few literary inspirations, and then there's one that I was playing a lot of Wolfenstein at the time. Um, on
Oh,
the
hold on. Okay. You have to explain what that is because not everybody knows it.
Sure. So way back when, I believe in the early 90s, a first person shooter came out called Wolfenstein, um, right around the same era as Doom. And, it was a POW that escapes a Nazi prison camp. And, in that game, he ultimately defeats a version of Adolf Hitler. And the version I was playing was the updated 2015 version, and it's a lot more involved. But the whole point is kind of um, a fascist regime, in the book is simply called. I just call it the regime. I didn't. I had a bunch of names picked out for it, strangely enough, but I kept settling on something plain, something that sounded menacing on its own. So in this one, it was called the regime. So I had always pictured 1930s alternative universe, um, Germany in a sense, in a city called Blackwell. Um, Everyone kind of does what they're supposed to do in order to fall in line with the government. They do their jobs, they go to school. Um, all the while, they every morning have to listen to a broadcast from the great Chancellor Albrecht Croft, which is the name of the antagonist in the book. Um, a lot of the other things that are going on while the main character is a guy named Bergen Green or Crane. and Alyssa Crane. And while they're kind of going through their own adventure, there's other things going on in the background that are greater than them that they don't even realize. So that's a big part of it. And if I fear that I'll start going into spoiler territory if I go too far into that.
Okay, so let's just say it's a alternate speculative, an alternate history, speculative fiction.
Right there, perfect.
Got it. Okay, so that brings us to, and the setting is 1930s Nazi, or the beginning, early days of Nazi Germany.
Right, something similar to that, right? I don't use Nazis in this. That's kind of everyone. Everyone does that. Everyone knows they're bad, but they were kind of the model for the regime.
Got it.
So to speak.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, that sets it up pretty nicely. And does it delve into the realm of fantasy, or more of just a speculative fiction, historical fiction?
Yeah, for this one, it's more speculative historical fiction. I would even sprinkle in a little bit of thriller in there. I don't really touch on fantasy too much, which is strange because for me as a writer, a lot of what my short stories are and my other novels I work on are mostly fantasy based. I do have a space opera in the works too. So this one was this is why it's strange that this is the one that got picked up. For me anyways. I'm excited that it got picked up. It's the one I poured my heart and soul into. But yeah, I would say alternative historical fiction with speculative fiction and thriller kind of sprinkled in there.
That's great. Well, congrats on getting the book picked up. I know some of the people at Kyanite Publishing, BK Bass. He's an awesome guy.
Oh, I love BK. Great guy.
It sucks that they're not going to be putting out any new works. And
yeah, that's right.
It's kind of sad to see them scaling back, and possibly I think they're going to be closing down here sometime
at the
in the
end of the year.
End of the year, is it?
Yeah. Oh, and I will say this: the Cranes of Blackwell has found a new home.
Oh, good.
But I haven't signed the contract with them yet,
Cool.
so I'm not sure if they want me to go out and say who they are. But I just can tell you it found a new home, so it will continue to be available, via Kindle and paperback and hardback, of course.
Good. That's good to know that that it does have a new home and it's going to continue to be available. So you mentioned that your next book or series that you're working on is a space opera. What you want to talk a little bit about that, since that's more science fiction?
Sure. So it's actually been something I've had in the works for quite some time. It's tentatively titled Nebulous, and it follows a colonial dominion. Very very generic for right now. Very StarCraft, and so they're basically still trying to find worlds to colonize. Very standard stuff. But one of the things that makes it a little bit different is that the colony class ships that they're utilizing come across their first kind of taste of alien species, and that's a little bit of Ridley Scott in me, where they come across an alien species, and the species, haven't quite given them a name yet, can no longer reproduce aside from a form of assimilation where they kind of genetically re-engineer your chromosomes and your genome sequence, and then you eventually metamorphosize into one of them. That's kind of where I'm at with it. It's very much a here comes a mysterious creatures from another galaxy that are here to wipe out humanity, and then humanity finds out a little bit more about themselves, that hey, we were given the secret to spaceflight by a peaceful species. We meet them. I always like to have a mix of betrayal in there. I'm not, so I'm just trying to figure out who's going to betray who. I will say this: it may be one of the series that I write that maybe doesn't actually have a happy ending. I do enjoy happy endings. I think there's a lot of difficulties in the world, so a happy ending always makes me smile. But this one, I'm looking at it a little bit more ruthless. So we'll see how it goes. But I have a good first draft done, but there's a lot of things I still want to do to it.
Cool. Well, you can go a lot of places in the world of science fiction, and uh, it sounds like you got a pretty good foundation to work from. I like the idea of aliens. Um, and if I'm giving too much away by
No,
saying
no,
this,
no,
tell me. But
no, of course not.
I like the idea that aliens are coming to Earth and take humans and turn them into hybrid alien creatures to grow their ranks. That's
Right.
a
Yeah.
little bit of a different twist.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm a full believer in aliens. Um,
So many people are afraid to say whether or not they believe in UFOs or aliens, and for you to come out and say that you believe in alien life, hats off to you, man.
well, I think there's a difference between saying they've been here and that there's aliens. So for me, I've never seen them, but I think the vastness of our universe prevents that from just the law of probability makes it really difficult for me to believe that there's nothing else out there. Now, as far as if they've ever been here, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to think that they have, but again,
Well,
um,
there's absolutely something that's flying around with impunity in our skies, buzzing our military, and I mean, these things have even been um, seen in close vicinity to our nuclear weapons, and that's a little bit alarming. And if you say that, if you want to try to put that off as something that's a foreign adversary, I don't think so.
no, I agree with you, and it's really kind of a scary thing. And for me as a writer, I think it'd be remiss of me to just kind of dismiss the outer world, or only because where would I get my imagination if it was not something that I had some level of belief in. I mean, my mother is a paranormal hunter in her spare time, so if that puts that out there for you about where I may have gotten my imagination from. She's a big proponent of that. But for me, I mean, it's one of those things that my eyes really got opened up. I took an astronomy course in college, uh, and when you learn about the vastness of space, um, boy, it really makes you think about what could be out there, what may have ever been here. Were they even here from long time? Have they just been hidden? I mean, it's really kind of interesting. And then what I like to do is kind of take those what ifs and try to put them into stories. We'll mark them as fiction for now, and hopefully it stays that way, especially if they're gonna um, come harvest humans, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting twist on it. Now, uh, I think we have already reached a tipping point on this planet to where, maybe 30, 40 years ago, if you said you believe in alien life, you were painted as a kook. But in the last 10, you know, 10, 20 years, people have started to come around to the idea that there's alien life throughout the universe and it's more abundant than we had ever imagined. And what I mean by a tipping point is we've gotten to a point where more people on Earth believe that there is alien life throughout the universe and even in our own galaxy, um, than the people who claim that there is no other life except for humans, or
Oh, I
than life on Earth. I don't think there's that many people who actually believe that life on Earth is the only planet to have life on it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that one. I mean, I just with the things that we've been able to discover, even just through a telescope, right? Or we just landed on an asteroid not that long ago. I mean, that kind of stuff's fascinating to me. Um, and I wasn't exactly like a physics major or anything along those lines. So when I do write science fiction, I intend to have people suspend disbelief so the things that I write work. But I know there's some really great authors that are really hard science fiction, and they do a lot of research into the physics behind space travel, for example, living in space. Um, what you can expect from colonizing a different planet, and if a human can imagine that, I imagine another species that is sentient has been able to figure that out too. Maybe even it's, I think Stephen Hawking that mentioned that he doesn't really want to meet aliens because if they can get here, that means they're by far way more advanced than us. And I tend to agree with him. I'm not ready to meet them. I'd like to see pictures of them, and I would like to, um, you know how they tick. But yeah, well, I wouldn't be ready to meet them yet. We'll put it that way. Especially at least the way I write them.
Well, let's just hope, if the day comes when aliens do reveal themselves to humanity, and we'll just put it that way because we know they're here, or we know that something is here. We don't know if it's alien life or time travelers, interdimensional beings, but something's here. They just haven't revealed themselves to the general public. But the day that they do, let's just hope that they're more benevolent than humans.
I hope so too. And
Because if they're anywhere near as primitive as humans, which I doubt that they are, yeah, we could be looking at extinction within a couple of decades of them doing that.
yeah, I like to think, what is it, James Cameron, The Abyss, right, where Ed Harris meets the kind of the angelic being at the bottom of the ocean. And then there's one movie with Gary Sinise. I can't quite remember the title of it, but he also meets a Martian that's all, they're way more benevolent than we are. And it's an eye opening experience. I'm with you on that one. If they ever do show up, let's hope they've been watching us for a while and they're just here to help us mend our fences and become a more peaceful species.
So the movie that you referred to with Gary Sinise, I think, is called The Red Planet.
Yes, that's it.
It's a great movie.
Oh
I
yeah,
do
I
love
haven't
that
seen
movie.
it forever.
Yeah, I had actually forgotten about that movie till you mentioned it. Now, going back to your mom being a paranormal investigator, what? And that, I mean, why didn't that translate into you and your interests? How come you're not doing that kind of stuff too?
I gotta be honest. Listening to the EVPs and going into old sanitariums and things like that at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's just not my thing.
Is it scary to you?
You know, I'm not gonna lie, I've never done it because I think I'm afraid to do it. So I couldn't really tell you if the actual experience would be scary or not. Because I do like horror movies, I do. But there's something different than whenever you're kind of there. Being in Pennsylvania, I've been to Gettysburg a lot, right? I've been there 4 or 5 times, and um, we've only ever had one experience, and it was when I was a kid, and it frightened me then. I mean, we were in the basement of some house where a cannonball went through the wall and killed somebody in the family, and they were doing like this seance thing in the basement, and everything went flying off the shelf. And there was a big storm outside, and I'll never forget that. But you know, I gotta say, I just don't have the chutzpah to go into an um, old mental institution and deal with it. I mean, I don't know. It's not something it's not that it hasn't impacted my work. It's just, it's not really as much of my passion as it is hers. But I will say this, it certainly sparks my imagination when I think about it and when I talk to her about the experiences that she's had. Nothing's more creepy than whenever you hear a little recorder and you hear voices in the background. Um, Now I have a rougher time with this one than with aliens, but I've definitely heard them. Now, whether or not it was somebody else in the group or something unexplained, like a white noise type thing, I don't know. Um, yeah, I'm just not as gung ho to do that, I guess.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you listen to my Halloween edition, the 12-episode series I did for Halloween, uh, you'll know that I have a hard time discounting anything paranormal. I just think that there's something to it, man. There's enough evidence and enough eyewitness testimony of things happening. And then I've had my own weird experiences that I can't explain. Like there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, I'm not going to discount it. 100% with you on that, especially from especially the EVPs. That really sells me on at least something. Um, but it's not that like I said, I don't know if I can muster up the courage to go to those old places. And this is, my mother can go ahead and do it, but me, I'm going to stand back here and I'll just let you show me your findings. And whenever you have your meter, show me how cold that one area is compared to where you're standing. I'm going to continue to stand outside of the building in my house. Um,
So
but yeah,
your mom is obviously a source of research when you're doing a story about something like that. I
oh
mean,
yeah, yeah.
that's a great resource to have available. Has she ever had an experience like a really negative, almost like she's been attacked kind of experience?
Yeah, actually, there was a house in a town by where I lived um, that there was a murder in it, and the negative experience wasn't like I'm not thinking the Conjuring type experience, but getting yelled at via EVP to leave, um, those types of things. I know she's experienced, and those are the extremely creepy ones.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times most of them are just minor things and they're questions, and it's just weird to hear it and a little bit creepy. But whenever you go to a place and there's really that negative energy, and she captures it, that's whenever it gets really, and she plays those back. That's when it's frightening, because it's not everything apparently is hunky dory on the other side every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if you or her are interested, there's an episode that I did with a psychic medium who also does ghost hunting, and she shares an experience um, during one of her paranormal investigations that is quite chilling. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. You can go
Yeah,
listen
please
to
don't
it.
spoil it. I'll
No,
listen to it.
yeah, it's episode 10. Her name is Sandy Lene. So, and the episode is titled "Encounter with Evil" on Dead Hand Radio.
I'll check it out, and I know she'll love it.
Ah, cool,
That's right up her alley.
cool.
Um, Yeah, there's a program that I do watch from time to time, and it's stuff along those lines. Not naturally just recreation. I'll be very curious to hear a firsthand experience on your program, and um, I know she'll love it, and I'll check it out with her. Be a mother son bonding moment. Being frightened together.
Very cool, very cool. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it too.
Oh, of course, yeah, I'll give you some feedback for
That's
sure.
awesome. That's awesome. But let's talk a little bit more about the science fiction realm and how it has influenced you. Now, what was it that and you did tell me that your wife was a big encouragement on you getting started to do the writing, but who would you say was like your earliest influence? What movie did you see or experience that made you say, man, that's what I want to do?
Well, not to be cliche, uh, Star Wars. Um, because I was fortunate enough that people are going to argue that um, the remasters were kind of hokey and garbage in some sense, but I was lucky enough that I was still a kid when they re-released them, and it really was something that caught my attention. Um, and then they had their prequels, which, while mostly forgettable, were part of my youth. But it was the original trilogy that kind of inspired me to fan out a little bit and get a better understanding of science fiction as a whole. Um, I think there's very few people that simply don't like Star Wars, but it's not hard science fiction, right? It's not one of those things where um, things like that could occur in space. So whenever I started really diving into science fiction after becoming a Star Wars fan, the book The Forever War by Joe Haldeman really kind of helped me take off into wanting to write and read more, a little bit more real. There's air quotes going on here, realistic science fiction. The Forever War, uh, following a guy that knows whenever he leaves Earth, he'll come back and his own mother ages and everything around him is different. And it's expected of being an infantryman and what he does. And some of the experiences where they actually don't even really know what the alien looks like very early on in the war. Um, the heavy stuff is, the understanding that I'm going to go across time and space. And when I come back, everything I knew and loved may be dead or gone or changed. And, that's always something that hits home. And it's not the first book to do that, but it was one of the ones that really kept me engaged. Um, and, something that really caught my eye with it was how he was treated when he got home. So, kind of circle back to the Cold War here. A lot of the Vietnam veterans, when they got home, weren't necessarily treated with the respect that they deserved. And in the Forever War, it's kind of the same concept. So they're fighting a alien species that most of the citizens of Earth, by the time he returns, don't even really remember or know or understand why that war is going on. So when he comes home, he's not treated like a hero. He's treated like a guy returning to see his life completely obliterated. So that was one of the things. That was one of the novels that really propelled me into wanting writing and reading and watching science fiction.
That's a good reference. And it's one that you don't hear a lot of people point to. I didn't even hear about that book until it was turned into a comic book. And the comic book is fantastic. It's a 6-part series. The artwork in it is just incredible. But
I'll have to check it out. I just started getting into comics myself with Neil Gaiman's The Sandman series. That was kind of my introduction to comics that were more, I suppose, literary focused than kind of your superhero comics.
yeah, there's a big it's a big difference between, like you said, literary comics and superhero comics. And then the Forever War, that falls kind of in between because it's not superhero, but I guess it would be considered more literary, but it's definitely science fiction. Um, and it's so interesting how they do that, man. They have, there's one part in the story where the guy, he falls in love with one of the other soldiers,
Right.
and then she ends up getting injured and she gets out of combat. And then he continues on, and as they would go out into combat, they would not age. But when they come back, like you said, everything has changed. And so the love of his life only lasted for, in his mind, a couple of days, uh, or maybe a couple months. I don't really know exactly. But,
Right. Yeah, it's roughly that.
and she lived out the whole rest of her life, never able to see him again. If I'm totally botching that, which is probably true, that's the way I remember it.
You're right on. I mean, I don't remember it detail for detail, but I do know that that's pretty much a gist, right? I mean, and it's it's kind of gut wrenching, um, in that sense, where you're kind of a prisoner of time. Time wins all, right? Time's undefeated, and it doesn't matter if you're writing a book or in a movie or your day to day. Even the most hard science fiction still have to abide by the rules of time for the most part. So um, yeah, you were right on with being kind of crushed with the love of his life and having to be a blip in his memory rather than a long-term experience.
And that was just an interesting take on time travel. And you know they did that again in Interstellar very well. I thought they
Yes,
did
they
that
did.
quite well in that one sequence where uh, the uh, Matthew McConaughey's character went down to that one planet, and he was only down there for a couple of minutes. But then when he came back to his ship, his his shipmate had aged like 50 years or something.
Yeah, that's a really good movie. Now, the only part of that movie was that whole kind of the continuum through a black hole scene that I didn't understand. I mean, but it wrapped up nicely. But yeah, it's the other part is when he sees his daughter at the end, towards the end, where she is in her 80s and he is still his same age,
That's
and
right. Forgot
you
about
know,
that.
and he returns and then he leaves because everything again he knows and loves is gone, and he goes back to find Anne Hathaway's character. But yeah, I mean, it's I always have a rough time with those movies. I love them, but it's always a reminder of time marches on no matter what, and so those are always rough for me. But again, Interstellar is a really good movie, and whoever's listening is, if you haven't seen it, go out and see it. It's a good movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, I highly recommend that movie. And as a matter of fact, I had seen the movie one time when around near the time that it first came out, and I wasn't that fond of it for some reason. Something just kind of rubbed me wrong about the movie. But then later on, I did an interview with another writer for a blog that I used to write. I used to interview writers and artists for my blog, and um, when I was talking with this, or exchanging emails with this writer, uh, he told me about the movie and what he thought about that movie, and it inspired me to go rewatch the movie with a different lens and look at it through the lens that he had described it to me. And when I did, I fell in love with that movie. Um, so yeah, it is a movie that I definitely recommend. And um, if anybody's wondering what he had to say about it, it's on my website, andrewhall.com, and it's the interview I did with Arthur Maccabee.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I encourage anyone to check it out. I mean, I had some time to kind of fish through your site before, and um, I'm looking forward to kind of diving into everything you've done. You've done a lot. Um, you know, I got to say, I mean, you have a lot of interesting sounding podcasts. I'm certainly going to go to the Halloween special um, and check that out, and hopefully not soil myself hearing scary, potentially evil tales um, from a medium. And those are the types of things I like to listen to in my spare time. I'm certainly not going to turn on the news right now. That's for sure.
Oh I don't even want to talk about that. Um, but yeah, man, I appreciate you saying that. I did I just have so many different interests, and like I did. I've done web design for the last 20 years, and that's been the staple uh, of my income, is just doing web design and marketing for clients. But the reason I started the podcast is it's something that I've always wanted to do, and this pandemic uh, just gave me the time to be able to do it. And I'll leave it at that, because I've already told that story many, many times. But the pandemic has given me the time to be able to spend and build up this podcast, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a great time doing the podcast. I hope
So
I
it's important.
I hope I can continue to do it.
As long as it's still a passion, I would recommend doing it, man. Because I think I'm one of those people that believes the moment you stop doing what you find, passion in, it's tough to pick it back up.
I agree.
Uh,
I do have my own opinions about the direction that science fiction is going in the future, but I'd really like to hear, where do you think it's going? What type of changes do you see in the next 5 to 10 years within the genre?
it's kind of interesting. Science fiction, there's certainly ebbs and flows to it. And for me, one of the things that's going to change science fiction, it's going to be for the better. It's going to be very interesting to see as more diverse voices kind of get involved. People who, may have been unable to get their works out to the forefront, getting an opportunity and showing different areas in science fiction that maybe you or I didn't think about. Um, you know, uh, a really cool science fiction novel is Blackfish City by an author named Sam Miller, and I met him at BookCon a couple years ago, and it's very interesting because his science fiction is heavily based on climate change, and obviously that's a very controversial topic for a lot of people, and I think you're going to see things that are a little bit more controversial getting to the forefront. Um, Maybe not controversial personally to you or I, but on a grander scale, that there's a lot more discussion about it in social media. And a lot of those do involve diverse voices and a change from your typical dystopian tropes and things that may be more driven by old science fiction like Isaac Asimov. Um, are we going to see those types of things circle back? Maybe, but there's going to be a different twist on them, and it may be stories that come from people of color or the LGBTQ plus community or things like that. And it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of stories come out of there, because those are perspectives I simply don't have, because I don't I don't live that life. So those are exciting. People are going to be a little bit braver, I think, with the things that they write, because the world's allowing you to say a little bit more about what you want to approach. And but that also means you're going to be open to criticism. So if you're off on your hard science fiction by in the eyes of a physics major, well, they're going to tell you about it. But I think the biggest change is just going to be coming from the fact that there's just a lot more voices out there that are getting heard, and the things that they want to write are getting out there, and hearing stories that maybe I didn't have inspiration for. It's going to be very interesting. I think that's going to be the direction of science fiction. As always, there's going to be reboots. In the movie world, I don't know how many alien movies that they plan on pushing out there. I like the first two. I can't say much about Covenant or Prometheus. They're okay. Um, but, you know, are they going to continue to push that? Probably. The one series I am looking forward to is Foundation on Apple TV from Asimov. I'll be very, very curious to see how they actually adapt that, considering the breadth of that series. But for the most part, like I said, it's science fiction is going to come from a wide range of areas, and it's going to be extremely diverse, and it's going to be really interesting because of it.
I agree with that, and I think that's a very all-encompassing answer. The only thing that would, in my mind, be a tragedy is if, you start to have these these diverse voices, and minds start to enter the genre, only to do the same stories, but with a twist
Yeah.
from whatever group they're part of. Just don't do something that's already been done with a different flavor. Try to incorporate and try to find different ways of telling these stories in an interesting and unique way.
Yeah. And you know what? And I'm looking forward to that. It's one of those things that um, I 100% agree with you. There's going to be a lot of people that tread over similar ground. And it's not because they're not good writers or movie makers, but it's probably because that's what interests them. And it's really hard, especially when you're writing, to delineate between what interests you and what's new and inventive. So I'm hopeful that things will be new and inventive, but almost certainly, like you pointed out, there's going to be retreads, and that will be disappointing. But I'm hopeful for the large portion of new science fiction artists, that they have something different, unique, and it's not easy to be different and unique. It's one of those things that you really have to rack your brain to kind of do something that's new. Um, it doesn't have to be the next great American novel, right? But you want to have something that's going to grab people and say, this is different. And I like where this is going, whether that's through world building or the characters themselves, Science fiction, affords people quite a lot of width on the things that they can do, and it's just up to the individual to kind of meet those lengths.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. So, is there anything that you wanted to talk about, or feel like we've maybe not really gone into depth on enough?
No, I honestly, this has been a pleasure. Um, I don't, I like coming on podcasts. I wish I could get into more. When BK had reached out to me and introduced your podcast to me, you and I have very similar tastes and things that we like to learn about, read about, watch. Um, I may have not been alive during much of the Cold War, but it's a very fascinating time period. I got my master's degree in intelligence analysis, and I wanted to go work in the FBI or CIA. Um, and this was at a time when defense budgets and secret clearance budgets just weren't there. But one of the things I did have the pleasure of having were professors that served during the Cold War, and hearing their stories, and um, hearing the difficulties they had, um, maintaining secrecy in a world where the whole plan was to just dig up your enemy's secrets all the time. Anytime you went into a bar in Washington D.C., you had to watch what you were doing. Who were you talking to? Did they always have your hand over your drink type things? Um, and learn and hearing those war stories from them, so to speak, was really fascinating. And that's one thing that I really liked to about your podcast background is you really picked an interesting time period in world history to focus on, and I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. Um, I can't take a lot of credit for that, because all I can say is it's something that I've had an interest in since I was a little kid, a young kid, a young boy, and it's something that I've always thought about. I've always had an interest in, um, what what would happen if the world was annihilated by nuclear war? What would the world be like, and what would surviving in a world like that be like? And that's why, some of the photography, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at it, but some of the photography that I've done has had a really post-apocalyptic feel to it, and I tried to capture that, what it would feel like to exist in a world that had been devastated by nuclear war.
It was a very real possibility.
Oof,
Um,
no.
and
There is a real possibility, but I do want to say this: it's not something that I hope for.
oh, no, no,
It is
no.
something that I do not ever want to see happen.
See, growing up in Pittsburgh, my parents tell me stories, my grandparents tell me stories. It used to be a very steel heavy area, hence Pittsburgh Steelers, so on and so forth. It used to be a major target because it was such an important supplier of a major industry. That's kind of dissipated over the years, but hearing their stories about whenever you'd read on the news and they'd hide under their desks and do all the drills all the time. When I used to work in the city, I'd walk down and you'd see the old fallout shelter signs on this church basement is a fallout shelter. And, um, it's a very scary thing. One of my favorite novels is The Postman by David Brin. Um, and it's kind of a post-apocalyptic understanding of what the West would be like in a post-nuclear, well, as an EMP attack, some large-scale devastation event. And it's very romanticized in a lot of novels, but when you see it in pictures and what you see to be the real world, it's more, it's interesting, but it's also very frightening, and it's not something that you would want to deal with. I'm not a big fan of the whole concept of Mad Max lawlessness going on in Western Pennsylvania. I'll put it that way, especially with a wife and two kids.
It's great to be able to imagine those worlds and experience those worlds um, through media, like movies, books, and that kind of stuff. One of my favorite books is The Road. That's a
Oh
very
yes, very
that's a
good.
very bleak, almost a depressing read. If you read that book, don't go with your family on a picnic on a sunny day and read that book. Because
Yeah.
if you read it any other way, you're gonna feel depressed. And but it's a great book. I love that book. And it hits hard, but it's a fascinating read. I forgot where I was going to. Oh, you know what? I do want to ask you. So you have a degree in intelligence, and you wanted to go work for the government, but what did you end up doing for a career?
I'm a compliance officer for a healthcare system.
Oh, okay.
But honestly, I really do enjoy what I do. I took a very weird path to get to where I'm at. And I always laugh, when I look back on how I got to where I'm at. I got into undergraduate school for meteorology, and I found out I'm not that strong in the necessary math. I think I've kind of pointed that out a couple of times. Um, and I majored in history and classical studies, and I ended up going to grad school for intelligence analysis, and I came out and I was doing financial fraud investigations. And it just kind of went end over end into healthcare, and did fraud investigations in healthcare for a while. And then just seemed natural to begin to learn the compliance aspects of things a few years back. And I really enjoy what I do now. I like where I work. I just, it's one of those things. If I travel back in time and I sat down with my younger self and asked what you want to do with your life, and it wasn't a compliance officer at a healthcare system, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, and it sounds a lot more boring than I'm sure that it actually is. It seems like, if you drill down and look at what you do, it's important work, and I'm sure it's very satisfying for you to be able to do what you do.
Yeah, there's definitely some moments of satisfaction for sure. I mean, for a lot of people, it sounds like I just would read regulations all the time and have to apply as regs, but I'm not an attorney. Is usually what I tell people. Is so a lot of what I do is provide guidance, but there's investigations involved, and there's you can often get some pretty interesting things that way. Some of the things people do to try to skirt the system are pretty creative.
Maybe we'll get into that in another podcast.
Oh, I'd love to talk to that in a different podcast. Absolutely. If you want to have me back on, I could talk to you all day about the fun stuff I've had the pleasure of seeing in healthcare fraud and compliance over the years.
I'm sure that would make an interesting fictional novel.
Yeah, it's weird because I know it would, but when I walk away from my desk after day, I really don't want to don't want to address it anymore.
That makes total sense. That goes back to the old idea that you go to the barber that doesn't have a clean haircut because he doesn't want to cut his own hair.
No, yeah.
But everybody else goes into that barber because he's a great barber.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't want to cut his own hair.
For me, it's a lot of doctors who don't go to the doctor. I always find that fascinating. In the healthcare world, that's usually you should really go see a doctor. I know you're a doctor, but you should see a doctor. Mm-hmm. And they don't.
What is that about?
I don't, honestly, I'm not a doctor. So my only theory is they care so much about their patients that they kind of get lost on their own health sometimes.
Okay.
But that would be my theory. But I'm not a doctor, so I go to the doctor.
See, my conspiracy brain went straight to because they know medicine is a fraud.
Oh, no.
I don't believe that. Okay. I know doctors are provide a valuable service to humanity.
Oh, I mean, if we ever do that other podcast, I'll give you some examples of doctors who are not good doctors. We'll put it that way. Bad doctors behaving badly.
That's an interesting podcast, but and that might be too scary. That might be too scary to put out there to the public.
There's, but suffice to say, most people are fine. I think most people are fine, but there are definitely some alarming stories I've had to deal with throughout the years, and we can save it for another time. But but not everyone's great. We'll put it that way.
For sure. Well, yeah, for this episode, we'll keep it into the realm of science fiction, and the horror podcast series was last month.
Oh, okay.
We'll keep the horror for another episode. Okay, so before I let you go, well, first of all, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. I do think that I agree with you that we covered a pretty good scope of topics, and we brought it back to the core theme of the podcast, which is the Cold War, and the core theme of this series, which is the science fiction aspect of it. But before I let you go, and before we close this out, would give people your website address, your social media, and where they can find all your works.
Sure. The Cranes of Blackwell, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any major retailer online. You can visit my website, www.jdkellner.com, for some short stories and some insights into my writing. Again, Andrew, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, and could you tell people your Twitter handle and also spell your last name so people know how to get to it?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at author JD Kellner. That's Kellner.
Awesome, my man. Well, again, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your story and sharing your insights about the world of science fiction. And I hope to have you on again. I was serious about bringing you back on to talk about some other topics in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. This is great. These are the types of things I like. I'm so glad it was conversational in nature. We got a ton of great insight and some things that I learned a lot, that we'll put it that way.
Well, we definitely have a lot in common, and it's always great to talk to somebody who I can bounce ideas off and learn things from. I learned as well. And yeah, it was great having you on, man. Thank you.
All right. It was a pleasure.
All right, JD, take care now.
You too. Thank you.